Hey everybody, Oktoberfest the enthusiast here. Welcome to yet another Guitar Hero podcast episode. I want to say firstly thank you all everybody for joining in into our last session with Alex Ortiz. It's one of the most fun that I had with talking about the Red Octane production on the guitars, and I really hope we can do more of this soon. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want to first give a warm welcome to a former Neversoft employee who was art producer for all the Guitar Hero games from Guitar Hero 3 to Warriors of Rock, and on his latest work, which has now been popping off on Twitter and on the internet, with Insomniac's Spider-Man 2. Ladies and gentlemen, Aaron Habibipour, how are you doing, sir?
Doing great. Thank you for having me on here. I'm excited to talk to you all about the Guitar Hero days.
Yeah, of course. So, Aaron, can you tell the audience who you are? What was your origins before starting into the video game industry, so everybody can know your little backstory or your background? Sorry.
Yeah. Um, uh, I, uh, I'm an illustrator, and I did some concept art storyboarding in the early days in the industry. And back in the 90s, I even worked in sort of like the .com tech bubble doing graphic design before I got into games. Um, yeah, I went to art school very briefly at Art Center Pasadena, and a little bit at Art Institute Pittsburgh. But school was not for me, so I'm mostly self-taught as an artist.
I wanted to know how do you get into your position into working for Neversoft, and what was your experience working with Guitar Hero 3 Legends of Rock, which is, as you know, the best-selling Guitar Hero game with over $1 billion, very successful. I would love to know what was the creative process and what was your role, if it was it was stated that you did some environment and some characters, so I would love to know what was the creative process with some of the iconic characters such as Axel Steel, Judy Nails, Johnny Napalm, and so on and so forth.
Well, so it's a little bit of a long story. So what happened was, I was at a studio called High Moon, and I was working on a game called Dark Watch. And after Dark Watch was done, we kind of didn't know what was going on, whether the studio was going to survive or not. We barely got Dark Watch out the door. I got a job offer from Neversoft to work on a game called Gun.
Mm-hmm.
So I went up and interviewed, and I came on the last year of production on Gun, and they wanted me to take over the art production of the game, but at that time, Gun was already well underway, and so what they needed me to do at that point was to finish out all the cinematics. So I did all the cinematics production work and all the dialogue direction, and making sure the Foley came together, basically just all the cinematic production work that was on the game. After we were done, we were going to move on to Gun 2, but Gun 2 did not happen. And I worked for a little bit on a Tony Hawk game. It was
Proving Ground?
Yeah. And I had done a little bit of stuff for Project 8, but I didn't want to make a Tony Hawk game, and I left. And I was gone for about 8 months. At that time, I kept in touch with Alan and Joel and all that kind of stuff. And I had actually gone by the office one day to have a meeting with Joel about I was working for a CG house called Brain Zoo, and I was doing cinematic production for them. And I worked on a TV commercial for, and actually it was one of the first game trailers to appear in a movie theater. It was for Lost Planet. Joel said, "Hey, do you want to come back? Would you ever consider coming back? We're going to do Guitar Hero." And I said, "Oh, absolutely, I would come back for Guitar Hero." So we all went to lunch together, me, Joel, Alan, and Brian, and Chris Ward, who was the art director. And we had a good chat. We had a good lunch, and I ended up coming back. And it was right during the early days of them setting up, basically trying to figure out how they were going to use the Tony Hawk engine to make Guitar Hero. So we were doing a lot of experimental stuff, and then I took over all the art production on the game, and that was characters, environment, technically animation, though those guys kind of ran on their own. I actually ended up doing a lot more on that game than just the art production. I was also, Alan and I co-wrote all the cinematics, all the cartoon sequences, and for 4 and on, I basically did all those myself. Yeah, we worked with Titmer on those.
So you mean you even worked? So you mean you worked on all of the cutscenes for the actual animated sequences in Guitar Hero 3? You recruit with the default the 3-man guys. So you have the singer, you have the bassist, and the drummer, and all the way until you beat Lou on the Hell venue. I think that's really funny. So I wanted to ask before talking about Guitar Hero 3. So what? How do you learn about Guitar Hero into your existence? Do you came across the first ever Guitar Hero game that was developed by Harmonix, or do you have any sort of experience with your first time on Guitar Hero before Neversoft got their hands on it?
Yeah, I mean, it was basically at every house party that was happening at that time. So when it came out, I was like, "Who wants to play a plastic guitar?" And then the first time I played it, I was like, "Wow, this is so much fun!" And yeah, and I mean, all the folks at Neversoft were obsessed with it before we did it. Everybody was playing it. We were playing it in the studio. And anytime someone would have a party over at somebody's house, there would, a Guitar Hero setup would be there. People would be playing it, and doing the 2-player or whatever. The first one had a 2-player, right? Or was you were
2-player? Yeah, it was 2 players because you had either co-op bass or rhythm, at least for the first. Technically for the first 3 Guitar Hero games, because it was 1, 2, and Roxy 80s.
Yeah, so but I mean, everybody at that point was playing it. It was basically a big craze, right? So when the opportunity came up to do it, I jumped at it because I thought, 1, I'm an old metalhead, and 2, I played a little guitar. So to get the opportunity to do that and to work with all the musicians and all of that on their characters and their storylines and all of that was awesome.
Wow. So I have a question, because now that you mentioned that you worked on the cutscenes, so I want to ask, were you involved with the if was there a storyboard for like the for what we already know for Guitar Hero 3 Legends of Rock? Because there was proof of concept for if Harmonix was to do Guitar Hero 3 in their own, which was, I think it was called Guitar Hero 3 Metalocalypse or something along the lines. So I wanted to know, was that something that Neversoft wanted to carry out? I don't know, some of that original concept, or were you guys just pretty much just doing your own thing with the whole thing with Lou at the end?
I'm not really aware of what Harmonix was doing with their own Guitar Hero 3. When Alan and I were talking about his ideas for the boss fight mechanics and what was happening, we were all really inspired by the movie Crossroads, which is like, that was something we kept talking about in the office, how much we loved that movie and how he fights the devil at the end in the blues thing. And so that's where all of that came from. And then Alan and I, we just had all these tropes, these funny tropes about the music industry and being in a band and what being in a band is like, and how the bassist gets treated, how the drummer gets treated. There's all these sort of like stereotypes and tropes about these bands. We're like, hey, let's build a whole story around this and do like some cartoons. And we wanted to get the Metalocalypse guys to do it, Titmouse Animation. So I don't know if that's where the Metalocalypse stuff comes in, but we went to Titmouse and we said, hey, we're making a Guitar Hero game, and do you want to animate the cartoon sequences? And they were like, absolutely. So that's where like the whole Lou and the band was born. Alan and I wrote those cutscenes together on the 3rd one. Lou kind of became so popular that we wanted him to be the villain in every Guitar Hero, and he would always sort of pop up out of nowhere. Because he's like, he's supposed to be like this slime ball manager, and he's always trying to get the band into an ironclad contract and all that sort of stuff. And so, like, he even comes into Guitar Hero Metallica. He's the slime ball manager. Yeah. So that's where all that started. And there was a lot of influences for that, like Bat Out of Hell. Of course, we had the bike with the with the demon wings at the end, and that's how they all escape hell.
Yeah.
And I also did a lot of motion capture on the game. So like I'm all the big characters in the game. So I'm Axel, Lars, the Devil. So it was probably just those three. Lars, Axel, because I fit the body
Ah, okay,
of the
yeah.
character.
Another large character I thought of, I don't know if you count this as large, but this is way later down the line. Would you even consider Demigod of Rock large character?
Oh, I was the God of Rock. I was the God of Rock. He was,
yeah.
yeah,
Well, yeah,
he was based off of Axel.
Yeah, there was God of Rock, and then there was
It has
Demigod
the
of
same
Rock.
facial structure, has the same face. It's
No,
quite funny.
we had to make him at the last minute. There's a funny story about that.
I would love to hear that.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So when we did the opening cinematic where the guy's climbing the mountain with all the speakers and
Yes.
Yeah.
and when we started to do Lou, they weren't originally supposed to be playable characters. Lou was, because you had to fight him at the end. But the God of Rock was like not supposed to be a playable character. And right towards the end of Guitar Hero 3, we were wondering like, hey, what are we gonna do for the credits? And I said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we threw a party, we got everybody to dress up, like get into groups and have their own fake bands, and then take pictures of everybody as if they're band photos.
Yeah.
And so we had a big party, and everybody came dressed up on a Friday, and we got a couple of kegs, and everybody was having beers, and everybody was going out in the back. They're all over places in the studio and taking pictures as if they were in bands. So we're like, okay, well now we're gonna scroll these band pictures along with the names and stuff. Well, what is it gonna scroll on top of it? So somebody had the idea of playing a song while the credits go by, and you couldn't lose, right? And so that was
Yeah, it was
Fire
Flames.
Yeah, through the fireflies, and I remember those pictures now. Now that you're saying this,
So
didn't not know that's what those were.
So the next not logical step was, and this was like right before we were trying to ship the game. I mean, we were like almost done. And I turned to Scott and I was like, what if we do the God of Rock playing on top of the speaker mountains, like the mountain of speakers, and he's just going to play just as him, a spotlight, camera rotates around him. It'll be a really easy venue to build. And everybody was like, are you serious? We can't put stuff in right now. And I kind of got the evil eye from Scott about it, but I was like, I can do it. We can put it together really easy.
So you made the venue for the end credits, or was it somebody else?
Well, one of the artists made it.
That was Mount Olympus.
Yeah. So we basically took Axel and we put a beard on him, and we just did it super super quick, right? We just basically took Axel, put a beard on him, we made his hair white, and put the toga on him. Just used that, and the venue got stood up really really fast. And we ended up putting it in there, and then that became the tradition to have the secret venue at the end of every game. So at the end of 4, it was the giant boat
With
that was flying.
Yeah,
Chariot.
chariots actually. So
And there was supposed to be a Star Wars one at the end of 5, but we didn't get the rights to do it. But we have built Jonathan.
Dang.
So, okay, I want to go through a little bit through chronological order because I genuinely would like to understand the whole process. So, I wonder, was there any different cutscenes that for Guitar Hero 3 that would have been different from what have we done today? Do you have any sort of stories? If there was like I don't know, let's say that we actually see the female singer's animated face, or because she's seen at the I think after the first venue, but it was a cut from far away, so you couldn't really even see her face. But you could always see the default singer, bassist, and the drummer. So, is there any stories about any different cutscenes for Guitar Hero 3?
Yeah. So in 3, we wanted it to be the stereotypical band,
Yeah.
right? And so we came up with a stereotype of the singer, who was totally obsessed with himself and all that kind of stuff, and the bassist and the drummer who just kind of were always in the background getting the sort of shit end of the stick. Sorry, pardon my French. And were kind of largely ignored. And then the drummer was also supposed to be super crazy. And then we sort of carried that forward in 4, but we eventually stopped like trying to show their faces a lot, because the fantasy was that you were once we put the character creator in there, the fantasy was that like you were the person in the band, and so representing that as a set character in a cutscene was weird. So we started so like Metallica, you never see their faces.
Right.
Yeah. So that kind of happened over time, where we were like, okay, it probably doesn't work to show. Like in 4, we had the characters, and we introduced the female bassist in 4, in the cutscenes.
Okay. So before we head into World Tour, I want to talk about Guitar Hero Aerosmith. Can you tell me about the process of doing the intro cutscene? Because I think the rest of the chapters, I think they were just introduced with the actual band.
They
itself.
are.
So
Yeah.
I would love to know what was the process when doing Aerosmith.
We had a story in there, and then we had unlockables. The story was basically the band, chronologically, the band breaking up and getting back together. I think the little cutscenes that were in there showed them like having disagreements, and then there was the whole thing of them getting back together. There was some cutscenes in there. I think it was a lot shorter than.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's like little breaks in the interviews of animated cutscenes.
Yeah. So it's interesting. That was probably one of the most interesting Guitar Heroes to make, because I was always dealing with the band. So we did their motion capture first. We went out to Boston and we did motion capture for them. And they only did like an afternoon's worth of motion capture. And we had the person that we had the least motion capture for was Joe Perry. And he was basically the star of the game. When Steven Tyler saw his parts, he was like, this needs to be, I want more dynamic cameras. I want it to feel like a music video. I want it to blah, 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 blah. He had all these things that he wanted to do. And he wasn't happy with his character and all that kind of stuff. And so he flew out, and we got him like a Star Wagon trailer that he would have for a movie set. And he just basically lived in the backyard for a month in the studio. And he came in every day and did all his motion capture. He sang all the songs so that we would have his facial capture. And then, I had to go out to Boston for 2 weeks and hang out with the band to get their characters done. So we all went out there to Vindaloo, and then I stayed behind for a couple of weeks to make sure that they were all happy with their characters. I got a call from Joe Perry in the middle of the night, and he said, "Hey, can you come to my house?" And this was like 11 o'clock at night. And I was like, it was Boston, so like the whole place was covered in snow. And I was like, okay, right now? And he's like, yeah. I want you to take pictures of my jewelry. And I was like, oh, okay. So I drove out to his house way outside of Boston, out in the country. He had like this farm ranch place. And I was like, I'm here. What do you want me to do? And he's like, just walk in the back door in the kitchen, and I'll be out there in a little bit. So here I am walking to Joe Perry's house in the middle of the night, just walking into his kitchen. And I just stood there uncomfortably for like 10 minutes. He kind of comes walking out of the darkness. All the lights are off in the house. So I'm just standing there. There's one light over the kitchen counter, and his dog comes out, and I was petting his dog. And then he kind of comes out of the darkness wearing a bathrobe and a bunch of like rings that he's then in like an arm clasp. And he wanted me to take pictures of his tattoos. So he took his robe off, and I took pictures of his tattoos. I took pictures of his nipple ring. I took pictures of all of his rings, because he wanted all that stuff to be accurate on his character. And so I sent those pictures back. And then for the week, the rest of the time that I was there was when we filmed all of those the interview scenes, and with the band. And so we filmed all those interview scenes with them. And man, I wish I had the stuff that we cut out of those, because there was so much of us goofing around making those. And Steven Tyler was hysterical, and he made all sorts of crazy jokes and stuff while we were filming those things. And a lot of that stuff got cut out and didn't get used. But I wish we had that footage, because it was fantastic. Some of that stuff back there, some of the stuff that we were doing with Steven was awesome.
I wanted to know, what was the I'm not sure how much involved you had with the celebrities on the Guitar Hero 3 era, which would be Legends of Rock and Aerosmith. So what was the process if there was some challenges when, inserting tattoos or piercings or jewelry into Joe Perry, Steven Tyler, or you have Slash and Tom Morello in that case? Oh, and what's the other one that was on unlockable vocal character in Guitar Hero 3? I forgot his name.
Michaels?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, Brett Michaels.
I have a good story about that. So I basically dealt with all the characters and their highways and making sure their characters were accurate. So I would be working with the managers and the musicians themselves to make sure that they were happy with what we did. And then they would come in and do their separate motion capture stuff on the stage, and they would work with the animators on the motion capture stuff. So we were designing all of Slash's stuff, and it was in the very early days, and we were we were designing Slash's character and all that kind of stuff. We were trying to figure out, like, how are we going to do cartoony curly hair? That was like a really hard thing to do back then, to try and get his hair to look okay. Especially with that game had to run at 60 frames a second. So there was a lot of things that we couldn't do that was...
Yeah, you guys were running Havoc physics, and I'm pretty sure you guys had to do a lot of stuff to actually make the hair look at least the most normal from what I've seen. Because I did recently play Guitar Hero 3 on Xbox, and to be honest, it's genuinely impressive how you guys break his entire hair to actually, move flawlessly.
Yeah. So I had a friend of mine that I grew up with in Virginia. His name is Pete Evick, and he's a guitarist, and he played in a lot of local bands around Northern Virginia. And I used to go hang out and see his bands all the time, because all my friends growing up were musicians. So he calls me one night and he goes, "Hey man, I'm in LA and I'm at this house out in the hills, and can you come pick me up and take me to the airport? I need a ride to the airport." And I hadn't heard from him in a while. And I was like, "Sure, okay, yeah, man, I can come get you." And so he gives me this address, and I go out to this house in the Hollywood Hills. And as I'm coming up to the house, I see there's a bunch of trucks outside, like filming trucks. And I'm like, "What is this?" I go into the house, and it was basically a TV set. And I was like, "Oh, what's going on here?" And it was the set of that show Rock of Love that Brett Michaels was in. And they were filming. Pete was touring with Brett Michaels. Brett Michaels started a solo band, and he and all my friends that he played in a band with back in Virginia were now Brett's solo band, and they are to this day. I was waiting for Pete to finish doing Pete was sitting there setting up all of Brett's instruments in the house, so that Brett can just walk around during the show and pick up a guitar and play it, and it's all tuned and it's all set up and all that kind of stuff. So he's there doing that, and they're doing camera tests with stand-ins for all the girls that were in the show. So they had a bunch of these models who were the exact same size and skin tone or whatever as all the girls who were going to be on the show, and they were just doing camera tests. So while I was waiting for Pete to do this, I was sitting at a table with Brett's manager. I sort of jokingly at one point said, "Hey, I'm making a game called Guitar Hero, and we need someone to come do motion capture for the singer. It would be funny if Brett would do it." And the next day I got a call after I took Pete from the airport. I got a call from Pete saying, "Hey, Jan told Brett that about being a Guitar Hero. He wants to do it." And I was like, "Oh, okay. I was just joking. I don't know if we can afford Brett." And they're like, "Oh no, he doesn't want any money for it. He just wants to come be in the show. He just wants to come be in the game."
Wow.
So
Okay.
so so 2 days later, Brett rolls up in the parking lot, and we had some people come in to film him and all this kind of stuff. I don't know if we ever used that for anything. I think it did get used for promotional stuff. But we filmed him pulling up into the studio, coming inside the studio. So originally, he was not going to be in the game. He was just doing a motion capture for the singer. But as we were walking through, taking it to the mocap stage, he stopped and he saw the concept of Slash on the wall. And these guys in the 80s had a huge rivalry. They were always playing pranks on each other on the road and all kinds of stuff like that, right? He was like, "Hey, is Slash in this game?" I was like, "Yeah, Slash is going to be the boss in the game. Like, you're going to have to, he's going to be one of the bosses, Slash, Tom Morello, and then the devil." And he's like, "And I'm going to be the singer?" And I was like, "Well, you're just the motion capture for the singer." And he was like, "But you're going to put my face on it, right?" And I'm like, "No, we don't have like your likeness rights. So we were just going to use your acting for the singer." And he's like, No. I want to be in the game. If Slash is in this game, I have to be in the game. And I was like, "Okay, I'm going to take you to the mocap stage so you can do the motion capture, and then I'm going to go talk to Joel." So I took him out to the stage. He got dressed. He started doing his motion capture, and then I walked into Joel's office, and I said, "Hey, Joel, Brett wants to be in the game." And he goes, "What do you mean?" and I was like, "He wants to be the singer." And he's like, "Which one does he want?" I'm like, "I don't think he wants any money, dude." And he was like, "Shit, okay."
Oh, fucking amazing. My God.
This is how business got done at Neversoft. So I walked back to the stage and I'm like, "Okay, when you're done with the motion capture, we're going to take you upstairs and we're going to take pictures of your face and with the hat and all that kind of stuff. And then we're going to model a head off of it," because we didn't have time to scan him at that point.
So I wanted to ask real quick. I'm sorry, but there's something interesting. So you're telling me that the motion capture that we see on the default singer is actually done by Bret Michaels himself?
Yep. Even
Wow.
when it's not Bret Michaels' head.
Wow, I
Even
never
if
I
it's not his head, it's Bret Michaels.
I thought it was Adam Jennings who did the motion capture for the singer, because seeing all of his mocap reels, like he's really quite the performer. I genuinely thought he would be the one. I didn't fucking think it was gonna be Bret Michaels. That's actually very amazing.
I mean, there might be some stuff sprinkled in from Adam in there, but Adam did a lot of our facial.
Yes.
Lips and things.
So Brett didn't do any of the facial capture. Adam did a lot of the facial capture that we did for the singers. And here's the thing about it's been so long now, I guess I can say this publicly, but we couldn't use Steven Tyler's facial capture on Steven Tyler's character because
So no, sorry, continue. Because I have a comment on the about that later on.
yeah, I mean, Jeff might have said this in his, and you guys interviewed Jeff. He might have said this, but we couldn't use his stuff because it was exaggerating the mouth even more on the character. And Steven Tyler was obsessed with how big his mouth looked in the game.
Dear God.
He went running around the studio one day. You could hear him from across the other end of the studio. He went into the character artist's room. And he was like, "Geez, my mouth is so big, blah, 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 blah. Why don't you make it bigger?"
Sounds like Steven all right.
And he goes, "I don't think it's big enough. Why don't you make it even bigger?" And he was just, he was. So what we had to do, but he came in for like a month straight, and he did all of his songs, and he didn't like lip sync. He sang all of them. So because he refused to lip sync. So Adam had to come in and do all of it over again because the way that he did it worked better on Steven's face on the model.
That's great. The mouth was too big for it to work properly.
Yeah, I was like,
What a reason for something to not work right.
yeah. So
we did stylized versions of these characters, right? And so, yeah. So he was unhappy, and his mouth was a little bit bigger at first, and we did make it smaller.
So yeah, because the thing is that I'm not sure if you probably know this, but there's a demo reel of Justin Parrish's work at Neversoft, and one of the clips that he included was Steven Tyler doing the lip sync on I think it was either 3ds Max or somewhere like that, with all the bones actually being captured, which is very interesting because I genuinely never thought he would do his own lip sync and that matter, like, I mean, like, what, he's the only person that ever done his own lip sync. Like, it's really interesting. But yeah, so very interesting. So okay, so I want to sorry, I'm like kind of thinking my words correctly. Basically, so when you guys did World Tour, you and correct me if I'm wrong, you were involved with the dynamic light show system, and I wanted to know what was the process of improving the light shows, because like, noticing from Guitar Hero 3 to Guitar Hero World Tour, you have much more shadows, you can see much more ambient lights, and let me tell you, on Metallica and Warriors of Rock, it's probably one of the best light shows that I've ever seen in any rhythm game ever. So I would love to know what was the creative process behind that.
In looking back at 3, when the note trackers were doing their note tracks, they had complete control over the lights. You know, they weren't artists, but they were in control over the light colors. They were in control over like how they moved, and it basically was they were calling the colors in every venue. So when those lights were, they might work for one venue, but then those colors overlaid on top of the colors that were in the background of other venues, it just started to become like kind of a mess, like a soup of just weird colors, because it was all additive, right? So a green on top of a red would give you like a weird, everything ended up being kind of like a weird soupy brown color eventually. And it just didn't look very well coordinated and choreographed. So I went back and designed a system with Alan that basically said every venue had a set design, right? So we would concept a venue, and then we would concept all of the phases of the light show and what colors you could use in the venue. And what we did was we designed a system where the note trackers could call sections of lights based off of story structures. So you had like rising action.
Yep. Yeah, rising action,
Yeah.
prelude, and I think you had climax. I think what was
Climax, falling action, wash. I don't know what this wash is, but
Yeah.
yeah.
And so we did that so that these guys could tie it to song structure, right? Like, so you could say, hey, this is where the rising action in the song is, so we're going to do this, and then the colors for rising action were set per venue. So every venue had its own light, so that they could call it in the note track, and it would and it would be specific to every venue, but every venue had all the same things, right? So they had all the same components. So they weren't using the colors anymore. We were doing the colors for the venues that we picked so that it'd all be designed well. And then we took a field trip to the House of Blues. It was me and Alan and I think a couple other people. I got a light show guy to give us a light show, like how he makes light shows for bands. Because and
Like a crash course.
Yeah, and when we went out there, I was like, oh, it's almost exactly like how we had redesigned the system, where he kind of like pre-programs the whole thing in there, and he has certain lights and positions and colors for every part of the song, and then he programs them. And I was like, oh, this is exactly how we're doing it. That's fantastic that we kind of came up with a system that's similar to the way that it's really done. As far as like them getting improved, I think as we went on, with 3, we kind of didn't know. I'm trying to remember. We had to hit 60 frames a second, and so there was a lot of things we couldn't do. And what we learned was we had to use the shadow casting lights very judiciously, because only one could be on at a time if we were going to hit like 60 frames a second. So in Metallica, for example, when we did the climax with the white lights and the strobing and all that kind of stuff, if you'll notice that like only one is really kind of on at a time. And so only one shadow caster is on at a time. By the time we got to Metallica, we had done a bunch of cool stuff. Like we had blending normal maps in James's face so that when he was like doing this, like you'd get.
Yeah, you can see the veins and the wrinkles. Very, very cool detail, actually, in my opinion.
Yeah. And so that was something we had to build specific to that, because when we scanned James's face and we started putting the motion capture and we were doing the close-ups, we were like, it looks off because his face doesn't wrinkle when he does it. So we had to build a normal map blending system for like his forehead, his neck, here, so that you could see the wrinkles, and it changed everything. It made it
turned out good in the final result.
Yeah, but it's funny because in our mod World Tour Definitive Edition, so we have James's model, but we don't have the wrinkles because of the extra normal map. So we unfortunately cannot have the wrinkles for now. So who knows? But okay. So speaking about light shows, so unfortunately, one of our developers, Addy Mills, unfortunately couldn't come because he was doing some diligences. But he gave me some questions regarding light shows. So I would love to ask you on behalf of him, so you could probably answer whatever you remember. So first off, I'd love to know the logic of strobe lights in general, because I still can't quite figure it out. Sometimes the lights turn white, sometimes they don't. Also, I forgot to mention, but he has currently made an open source program that like everybody from the Guitar Hero community can make their own custom songs with the light shows, the animations, and the custom lip syncs, which, funny enough, we now do on our iPhones or any other face sensors. So that's and he's actually pretty understanding how the light shows work for like I think almost a year now. So that's why I wanted to ask you some of these questions as well. So unfortunately, he couldn't come here.
I'm trying to remember how the strobe stuff worked. I think the strobing was its own category, like rising, action, falling. And if I understand it, I remember it was per venue. I don't know why the color would be different than white though, because I think that was the intention. But that might be different from Metallica to 4. We might have changed it.
Yeah, if anybody could open the Reaper template and show him like how the template looks, so he could probably remember. But yeah, so it's we know that you guys did it on Sonar. The way we're doing it is now on Reaper for our MIDI stuff. So what was the reason for the retooling of the system in World Tour? How come colors could no longer be overridden?
Because I'll be honest, because the note trackers made terrible color choices.
Now, way to be brutally honest.
Because Vance and Marv's, I'm still best friends with Marv's, and we did 10 years of motorcycle trips together all over the country, and in some places in Europe we traveled together. And they know the reason. It's when they were picking the colors in the venues, it was becoming really muddy, and we wanted each venue to have its own design and its own choreography and its own camera cuts and all that kind of stuff. And that was just the easiest way to give the note trackers control over like the light show, and us retaining control over like how we wanted the visuals of the stage to be set. Red is not a good color in every venue. You know what I'm saying? And the way that the lights, because they're not real lights, they're additive tones that have an effect. And so when you put additive stuff on top of other colors in the background, you just get weird mixes of colors. And so if they note track everything in one venue, and then it plays in another venue later on in the game, and those colors don't work well or they don't mix well together. You get like a mess.
Jimmy put a screenshot of the Reaper MIDI template in general. On the left-hand side is a label of what the MIDI notes are meant for.
I never worked any of these. When is I see overrides?
Yeah, it's it's all the stuff that Addy Mills did. So it's all that. This is all of his template. Well, actually, I think it's probably borrowed from Rock Band 3's venue light show stuff, but I could be wrong. But
He just read like some of the game. It specifies what MIDI note does what, and he just basically wrote down what MIDI note does what. Basically, we didn't know that override color doesn't work on World Tour, so that further there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it doesn't work because we took it out.
Yeah. I did try it, and I didn't really notice a difference in the lights. So I was like, maybe I'm doing something wrong. But now I know that they don't work.
I think it all works with the spotlight colors because I have there was that.
There's like a separate section for them.
Yeah. If I remember correctly, the spotlight was like its own thing.
Yeah. Something, yeah.
all right, so let me ask these last two questions from him. So, what was the reason for eventually adding in Note 107 to the light shows? That's the note that allows you to blend lights using the length of the notes rather than defining a blend time. And also, that's the only exclusive note that's used on Warriors of Rock, to my knowledge.
It was not on Warriors of Rock. So if they changed anything on Warriors of Rock, I don't know. I left right after Metallica. Well, but leaving after Metallica was Warriors of Rock was already kind of halfway done. Like we had started to do all the venues and stuff for it, and so I was working on the venues in the early days. Oh wait, no, that was 5. Yeah, I had nothing to do with Warriors of Rock.
I see.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that actually eliminated one of the questions I had for later on.
When I left, we had finished Metallica, and my personal opinion was it's not going to get any better than Guitar Hero Metallica. And they told us that they were splitting up 5 into 2 games. Was splitting into 5 and Band Hero.
Yes.
Yes.
Or whatever they ended up calling that one that was supposed to be more like mainstream music. And
Yeah, it was.
That's called Band Hero.
Yeah, and did they have a keytar? We were doing a keytar at one point.
I think there were some songs that were note tracked to have guitars. Maybe I don't. Oh, I think it was Mr. Roboto. I might be wrong. Who knows?
They didn't actually come out with a keytar. We were. I thought we were prototyping one at one point, but I had for years. I had a garage full of guitar prototypes.
Really?
Oh, wow.
Like versions of the guitars. I kept them because we had some really cool prototypes. Like, at one point the guitar had like chrome pieces, like really nice metal chrome pieces, and so we got these prototypes of like the tuners had chrome pieces on them. They had like there was chrome on the what do you call it?
There.
Yeah.
You know what? Let me find that tweet of Brian Bright showing off his Guitar Hero prototype guitars because I thought they were really nice.
Yeah, I threw them all in the trash eventually. I tried to keep them, but like I just didn't have room for them anymore, and so I had to throw them all in the trash.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, understandable, but
Maybe you probably remember, but it's basically those are the World Tour prototype guitars that was used for the touchpad.
Yeah, I meant yes, I had a couple of these myself too. And Brian would solder these in himself. And yeah, Brian was just crazy. He was just crazy with he knew a lot about electronics, and he had his own little madhouse or mad scientist set up at his desk. We were all in one big room together.
I like how the one, the far right there, I like how that one has the red and green switched around.
Yeah, we messed with a bunch of different stuff, right? Like he tried the buttons, and then we did the slider, and then but no, what I'm talking about is like the next rev, the one that the guitar that we have for Guitar Hero 4. I think at that point we had parted ways with Gibson, because they were really hard to work with.
You mean this guitar in general? The
Yeah, that one, when we first got that, there was a premium version of that guitar that had it was like all the bits were chrome, like real chrome, not chrome plastic.
yeah.
And it had like the base plate that was going to come with it was like really nice, but it was too expensive to produce. So we went back to all the plastic bits.
Oh wow.
That's a shame, but for the sake of cost, I understand that.
So yeah, I wanted to ask you this last question. It was what other features would you have loved to see get added to the light show system if Guitar Hero had continued with Neversoft?
Well, I mean, if we had actually transitioned to a new console,
Which would be Xbox One or PS4?
yeah, well, I think that would have probably let us do more advanced stuff with the venues and the art. Like, we couldn't use normal maps in the venue. We couldn't use specular. We had to rip all that stuff out because it was hitting the frame rate too hard.
Wow.
One of the biggest innovations that we made was during Aerosmith. Steven Tyler really wanted to sing to a camera. And before that, we had just a bunch of we had a pool of random points where the cameras are, and it would cycle through medium shots, short shots, long shots.
Yeah.
And we built a system for it to cycle through those shots without having jump cuts. But Steven wanted to be able to sing to a camera. And so when we motion captured him, we put a guy on the motion capture stage that had a camera. And
Yeah.
Steven was singing it, and we were capturing the camera, and then it would switch between the motion captured camera and the other pooled lights and stuff. And it got way more dynamic.
Yes.
And it actually started to look like a music video after that, right? And so we started doing that with all the people that came in. So I would imagine that, like, if we had gone through a console transition and we were still doing those things, I would have hoped that we would have gotten more, better lighting, better real lighting, as opposed to stuff, because we've had to fake everything.
Yeah.
So I would have wanted like more volumetric lights, more more real strobe lights, more normal maps and specular stuff in the venues, so that we could just make it look more realistic. But that's probably what I would have done.
Yeah.
And I think our art style got probably a little too, what's the word for it?
Too detailed.
It started to, well, at one point, I mean, I guess with Warriors of Rock, it changed a little bit, but it started to get a little bit too much like we were a parody of the musicians, and that actually kind of made some of them a little upset, like Aerosmith and stuff, thought we were basically making fun of them with some of the character designs. And so I would have probably veered the art style a little bit differently, but I left after Metallica, so.
Funny that you mentioned that, because Guitar Hero 3, Aerosmith, and World Tour is on PC. I don't know, that could have been funny if you guys actually went all out with the art style. I mean, we're doing that with World Tour, and we've added like all the venues from Metallica, Van Halen, and Smash Hits into PC. So, which I want to...
We have 2 GH3 venues and like 6 or 7 5 venues.
Yeah.
We have a handful of Band Hero venues.
I'm really hoping for Aerosmith venues to eventually make their way.
So I want to now this is when I wanted to jump into Metallica, because
Hey, just real quick, I think it's fantastic that you guys are capable of doing all this stuff. I think it's awesome that you are pulling the venues out and putting them into different games and stuff. It's fantastic.
yeah, genuinely something that
Magic.
we never thought it would probably be possible, but hey, look at that. So
April of this year, we made it happen.
It
yeah,
kind of all started because people wanted to play the Metallica songs, and the Metallica songs need their own venue. So it was a given that we needed to port like the actual venues from Metallica.
all of them from Xbox 360 because they have the better qualities than So I wanted to. This is where I wanted to jump into Guitar Hero Metallica because you were in one of the behind the scenes footages on the Shortest Straw Lars mocap at the end, and you were holding a camera and your shirt was censored. Which I hope it's not too much of a personal question, but was it because you were wearing like a trademark band or
Yeah, it was the Rob Zombie shirt.
oh.
Yeah, it makes sense to blur that then.
It was a Rob Zombie shirt, and we didn't have Rob Zombie, so we had to blur it out.
Yeah,
There's the screenshots.
So I wanted to ask, what was the experience because of watching Metallica performing their own songs at for their game, and not only that, having in my opinion, one of the most impressive light shows, as I mentioned, because when I was playing Guitar Hero Metallica recently on Xbox, and I was playing on the Tushino Airfield, one of the light shows is incredibly insane. The environment was actually, blending in with the darkness. It's super interesting. And I would love to know what was the creative process on that.
That's what happens when you don't let the note trackers control the colors.
Yeah.
Those poor note trackers.
That was sort of like the peak of our superpowers for making venues and light shows. Like we had owned it down to, we knew exactly how to do it. We knew how to do it right. We knew how to blend the colors well. We knew how to work with the tech and the systems that we had. And we had some improvements, like I said, with like having a couple of shadow casters or lights that reacted to the normal maps and the specular on the characters. So that's kind of where we were with it. And we were designing those venues with Metallica, because I wanted to do fantastic venues. Like I wanted to make more thematically, but Lars said, no, we're not Iron Maiden. We don't do these crazy sets with the moving stuff. And I want it to be more like places we actually played and sets that we actually had. And the concession was the hidden one at the end with the Cthulhu.
Mm-hmm.
The ice cave.
Yeah. So James, I'm also a huge H.P. Lovecraft fan. And so when I pitched it to James was like, fuck yeah. And we had to convince Lars to and we were like, it's the last venue, you unlock it in the credits, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, okay. And he finally kind of caved into it. I wrote all the cutscenes for that specifically so that at the end they were on the plane and the plane crashes, and they get swallowed down into the ice pit, and then you go and play the credits venue as it comes out of the cartoon, right?
I love the song y'all picked for the ice cave. The thing that should not be. Fantastic.
Yeah. I think there was another song that we wanted for that, but we didn't get the song. And so it ended up being Thing That Should Not Be. I forget what song it was, though. It might have been Call of Cthulhu, but we didn't end up doing it, or it ended up being someplace else in the game. But that's what it was originally Call of Cthulhu.
So I actually wanted to talk about the cutscenes because so there's this little image that we call it. It's the Guitar Hero iceberg little chart where we had like an iceberg, and you would tell like very obscure topics. And there was one in particular that I wanted to ask, and it was that the Guitar Hero Metallica story is a storyboard with the Metallica Junior. It's supposed it was said that it was based on a true story, quote unquote. So I would love to know like what was the process of creating these cutscenes for Guitar Hero Metallica, and was there any true to what people would speculate from saying that it was based on a true story?
There was a band that followed around Metallica so in that case, in that instance, yes, there was some truth to it. They did have a band that kind of followed them around in they were like super fans, and they were in their own little band. And and Lars and James wanted to have a little homage to them. I don't remember exactly the circumstance or the story around that, but so basically what happened with the cutscenes for that was when we were on that day on the mocap stage. By the way, that mocap stage is the original Industrial Light and Magic soundstage up in Santa Rosa.
Yeah, Jeff Swenty mentioned us. Yeah,
He did mention something about that. I forget where it was.
And that is where they filmed all of the special effects for the first 3 Star Wars movies.
yes.
And also there was a movie back in the 90s called Dragonheart with Sean Connery that had like the first like big CG dragon. And there is up in the corner in the rafters was the prosthetic dragon head that like Randy Quaid, somebody had just left it there. It was the only thing in the studio. The dragon jaws were just hanging up there on a thing, and it was just a really. And I instantly recognized what it was, but yeah, that was a cool stage to be on, both to film Metallica and to do that. Anyway, so when we were on the stage that day, that's when like I started pitching the idea of the story to James, and we got a bunch of stuff from them. After that, we ran it by Lars. That's when he gave us the idea of the Metallica Junior stuff to incorporate into it. And, James has he really hates glam metal. And he had all through the 80s and stuff, I think the biggest one that he always used to sort of take the piss on was Motley Crue. And so that band is based off Motley Crue. the evil band, and it's based off of Motley Crue. We had another name for them at one point. Oh God, what was the name? We had to change it because it was too, it was too much. So we had to change the name of the band. I forget what the name of the band ended up being though. I haven't seen those in so long.
I think the name of the band ended up being called like the Poseurs or something.
The posters, yeah.
Right. Right. They originally had a way. It was more it was very obviously Motley Crue. What was the name?
I love how y'all made use of like a real thing for that. Like that's great.
Yeah. So there was like the whole idea of the Metallica Junior, the guys in the van that were following them around to every show, and that's kind of what we wanted to represent in those cutscenes.
Well, that's cool.
Okay. So, I want to, but so this is very interesting. So, you were part of the production for the McFarlane toys. I would love to know, do you still have those figurines with you, or and also I would love to know the history with those toys, and when did it stop being produced at some point, if you still remember.
I remember Todd McFarlane came into the office. I still have an autographed faceplate. I think it's in a box someplace. But he autographed one of my faceplates. And I had a couple of pictures with him. But basically he came in and we talked about what we wanted for the characters and what we needed to do to get it to them. So I had to get all the sculpts for the characters, and we put them in. I think somebody had to go through and like figure out where the joints were going to be, and then send those files off to McFarlane Toys. And I mean, most of our involvement in that was basically just like meeting with Todd, figuring out what the logistics looked like, and then prepping all the models to get sent out, and they handled basically the rest of it. I want to say they went for like a year, maybe. They were done before I left Neversoft.
There was this is not really
and unfortunately I didn't get it. I think I had one for a little while. I think I had a Johnny Napalm. Is that his name? Johnny Napalm?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a Johnny Napalm for a while. In a box. I don't know where that ended up.
Man.
Okay.
There there was something I wanted to ask. Going back to Metallica for a second, go back to Guitar Metallica. So I don't know. Speaking of art related things, I don't know how like into like menu design or like the way the interface was laid out you were, if at all. But I mean, were you involved with that any?
No, so I wasn't. The all our menus and this faceplate were designed by Brendan Leff, and I think I'm pronouncing his name right. But any of this stuff that you're interested in is like all stuff that he did.
Oh, okay. Because I was just gonna ask, because like, that's so cool.
Yeah, so this is like this is the special faceplate that only folks at Neversoft got when we launched.
That's awesome.
We launched 3.
That is so cool. Well, I was gonna, I mean, I was gonna ask. I mean, okay, so consider you didn't work on the menus and like the way the interface was navigated between things or whatever. I was just gonna like ask, what was the like? I appreciate the thought process of using like bits and pieces of like Metallica art for like the menus or whatever. So like going between menus, you had some form of Metallica graphics somewhere in there, like really like the albums, whatever.
So I mean I did do the 3D parts of it, like we did, the team did. I just want to be clear that like at this point I was not making art. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I would occasionally paint some textures here and there, or I would help do some writing, or I would help put together art bibles, or I would put together ideas for venues, that kind of stuff. But I was running the team, and the team was like 80 people. So
Oh, okay.
most of my time was basically figuring out how 80 people were going to make 3 Guitar Heroes at a time. Because at any point we would have like there would be like, well, there would be Aerosmith and 4, and even the beginnings of Metallica were all kind of overlapping one another.
Oh, crap.
So I had to figure out how to do, and you know, each game had Aerosmith had like what 8 or 9 venues. 4 had like 18 venues.
Yeah, 4 had exactly 18 venues. Yeah.
And then we wanted to double that in 5, and that's why they ended up getting split between Band Hero and 5.
Yeah, because 5 only ended up with like 14, I think. Like,
yeah. Basically, the only way that we were able to do those was if we just kept making them regardless of what game they were in. We just kept making venues. We just kept coming up with ideas for venues, and we just kept making them. And then the team could pick which ones they wanted in their game.
I guess that would be I guess that would be a problem. You just be like, oh yeah, we got all these venues. I don't know where to put this. I don't know where. It's like figure out where to put it.
Yeah. Well, it's just because we had to make those games so fast that I had to find a way to get out ahead of everybody. And we had to do things like make sure that like when they mocap stuff on the stage, that the speakers were always in the same place, the drum riser was always in the same place, so that any venue could have any bit of mocap on it, and the cameras and stuff would all work. So the stages have like basically an area that you can't touch of art wise, and that clears out, that makes sure that like the cameras will all work in every venue. And then you can't put pillars or whatever where the camera spots are. But to your point about the main menu, I was at Metallica HQ for probably 2 days, and I went through and photographed everything, like all instruments, all the banners, all the whatever, and then we used that to build the HQ interface. Right, I think it ended up being like there was parts of HQ that were in there, right? The recording room, the room with all the banners in it and all that kind of stuff, and then the menus were overlaid on top of that.
Yeah. There was one more.
Brendan and Chris Ward did the menus. Chris Ward was always doing. He always wanted to do the UI interface stuff, and so he would kind of work directly with Brendan on that.
Oh, okay. And there was one more thing that I wanted to ask, and then someone else can take the reins back. It'd be October or whoever. Jumping just briefly back to World Tour. What was the I'm just curious if you had any involvement with it when the Rockstar Creator System was introduced in 4. What was the driving force to put that in the game?
Yeah, so we had the system from Tony Hawk. It was the Creator Skater.
Yeah, you see references like that all over the internal code for Creator Rocker.
Yeah, that's the funniest thing about the engine was that the engine was built around Tony Hawk, and so even in Gun, at some point we were able to do rail slides on certain things because it was a skater. So and I think that the main player is called Skater.
Yeah, there's file references in the game files. Like I've seen like Skater Mail for some things.
Yeah, and that's because it's the Tony Hawk engine.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's basically, it comes down to wish fulfillment, right? Like, yeah, you could play Judy Nails or you could play Axel, but what if you could be your own rock star, right? Make one that looks like you, make one that is your wish fulfillment for being a rock star. And then what we did was we kind of reverse engineered all the main characters, and we made them into archetypes, and then we made more pieces for those archetypes. So we had like the punk, the metalhead, the dark metal.
Yeah.
Cameron Davis did a lot of the concepts for all that. He posts those things to his Instagram all the time. You may actually want to also interview Cameron at some point. He did a lot of the design work for all those pieces. So I'm sure Cameron would love to talk to you guys. Because he posts that stuff on his Instagram all the time. And he was the guy who designed Lou and what was her name? Midori,
yeah.
Yeah, she was one of the new characters that we had added, Midori and Lou, to 3. He designed those.
Do you mind if I add?
Yeah, sure. I'll be right back. So ask him anything real quick.
So, add what you said about Cameron. I actually have spoken to him, and he's very amazing. Designs awesome. I actually have shown him a few renders I have made, a few bits of art, all that other stuff like James, Lars playing along, and the cast of Warriors of Rock, and he absolutely loves pretty much a lot of it. And I have the temptation to ask him if it's not really me to ask for an interview, but I constantly have the urge to ask him if we could potentially do an interview with them. But that'd be awesome.
I agree we should get Cameron Scott Davis in for an interview at some point.
Yes, that would absolutely be awesome. I got a question that probably if you in mind while October is gone. What was your favorite, you can pick multiple if you want, but favorite venue design just in general? Could be complex, non-complex. What was your favorite?
They were both in Guitar Hero and Metallica. The Ice Cave is probably my favorite. That's the one that I had the most influence over, because I had a very specific idea for what that stage was supposed to be. And then the other one was the Injustice for All set, and that's just because I'm a huge Metallica fan, and that's the stage.
Donington Park, isn't it?
Yeah. That's the stage I remember from seeing Metallica when I was like in 8th grade, 9th grade. They had the Injustice for All set with the crumbling, Justice statue.
Oh no, that's Damage Justice Tour. That's right.
Yeah.
I had the wrong band.
That was the.
Anyway, those are my two favorite. I mean, there's a bunch of others that are really cool. And I'm a huge Iron Maiden fan too, so the idea of of us getting more and more crazy with our venue designs and like all the moving pieces and the sets and all that kind of stuff. So that was like me and Alan were always, and Jake too, who was the lead environment artist. Like we were always really into making just really cool stages with all the sets and stuff. It's just there's a whole showmanship to the whole thing. Like all these 80s metal bands used to have all these great stage shows that were, and it's like you're going to, like I always equate going to see an Iron Maiden show with like a night at the theater, because they treat it like a play. Like it's all the way that they changed the sets out, the backdrops. Now they have these inflatable props that come out. Like last year, the Iron Maiden show I went to last year was the best Iron Maiden stage show I've ever seen. And
Awesome.
Which is weird. Like you'd think they would be like resting on their laurels at this point, but the stage shows just keep getting better and better. But those are my two favorite. I think if I could try to even remember some of the other ones in between, we made so many of them. It's hard.
I was gonna ask, do you still have any sort of piece of art of somebody that didn't make it into Guitar Hero, or is that just lost somewhere?
I don't think we had anybody that didn't get into it except the Beatles.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Because Harmonix ended up taking them.
Yeah. I have a really good story about that. So towards the end of 4, we were all like crunching to get 4 done. And somebody came into my office, I forget who it was, but basically it's like, hey, we want to pitch Guitar Hero Beatles. And I was like, okay. And they're like, well, we want to put together a venue. And you put together a venue in the next couple of days. These took months to make. They're like,
That's really crunch period then.
Can you make Beatle characters and a stage for us to, and we'll note track a song and we'll go up there and show it to Paul McCartney. And I was like, originally I was like, no, that's ridiculous. And then I was like, okay, let me think about how we can do this, right? And so we were building the create a character thing at one point, and I'm like, hey, can somebody go and try to like mock up the Beatle faces in the create a rocker, right? So a couple artists went in and they spent an afternoon trying to like mock up the faces. I'm like, okay, well, if we can very quickly sculpt the Sgt. Pepper jackets, right? And we can just give everybody Sgt. Pepper jackets and then make them different colors and then use these heads. And then we took the New York ballpark venue from 4.
AT&T Park, yeah.
Yeah, and somebody just sculpted made a big yellow submarine, and we just put that in the back of the stage, and then we put together this whole pitch. And they went up there and they played it for Paul McCartney. Now and then the deal didn't go through. There was a whole bunch of financial reasons why we didn't do it. But years later, when Guitar Hero Beatles comes out, they do an interview with Paul McCartney about how the whole game happened. And in that interview, Paul McCartney says, "Oh, they all came up here and they showed me a venue that they had built with the characters, and I couldn't believe how they did the Sgt. Pepper jackets and they had the yellow submarine in the background." I'm like, that's not Rock Band, that's us. She was talking about the Rock Band Beatles was the venue and the characters we built to go pitch it to him. And that they didn't end, and then we ended up doing. So so if you ever see that interview again, he's talking about the venue.
Yeah.
Did you have a favorite character, Aaron? Did you have a favorite?
Lou.
And immediate hit.
Lou's good though.
And also, I don't know if you guys play D&D, but his guitar is called the Obliviax.
Yes.
Oh my god.
That guitar's thing.
D&D creature. Yeah, no, but
Yes.
yeah, I named the guitar. It was the Obliviax.
Oh, that's awesome. Well chosen name.
Yeah,
Very well chosen name, and
It fits perfectly.
Yeah.
yes.
So
I mean, I do have some cool stuff I can show you guys. Give me 1 second.
oh my god.
All right, so this is my Metallica album that I've owned since 8th grade. And I got the band to sign it.
Oh, that's awesome.
My god.
And these are Lars's drumsticks from that video, from that stage.
Oh, that's so cool, dude.
And this, I bought a Les Paul for every Guitar Hero I worked on. So this is Metallica.
That is amazing.
And this is James's pick.
Oh, wow.
Joe Aries pick. from Aerosmith.
Oh, wow.
This is from Guitar Hero 3. So it has Slash, Tom Morello, and Bret Michaels' signatures on it.
Dude, that's awesome.
The Oktoberfest that has the signatures. I'm losing my mind here.
It's awesome. You'll notice that it's kind of smudged off a little bit here. That's because when I bought this thing, after we finished 3, this is my favorite Les Paul in the world because I'm a huge Led Zeppelin fan. So the Sunburst Les Paul is my favorite Les Paul. And I bought it for a while, but I couldn't resist playing it. And my ex-wife, who was an animator on Guitar Hero, she kept telling me, "Don't play it. You're gonna wipe the signatures off. Don't play it. You're gonna wipe the signatures off." But I couldn't help it, and I eventually some of it started wiping off.
Temptation to get too strong, but again, understandable.
And it's like Inari. Yeah. So yeah. All right. So these are some cool things I wanted to show you guys. But yeah, so I do have memorabilia from the games.
Well, that's awesome.
It's not out.
Yeah, I'd like to ask something. So, I looked in the Guitar Hero Van Halen credits, and it said that you were in the special things, apparently. So, were you involved with Van Halen at all?
No, it was made by a different studio.
Yeah, I know.
And I consulted with them on how to write the cutscenes. That was the first time that they went and did the cutscenes like without me writing them. And I had to basically teach them how to do our light shows. So it was a lot of like phone meeting consultations and stuff to get them up and running on how to make a Guitar Hero game with those elements. And so that was my level of involvement with it. And then Van Halen came to our studio to do the motion capture, but that was with the animation team. I basically just helped them get up to speed on how to write. So how to write Lou, what are the elements to writing Lou? What are the elements to writing the band stuff? And how to get the most out of the cartoon production stuff that we did with Titmouse.
I love how writing the elements of Lou is a whole category on its own.
There was a very specific art to Lou and what Lou does and how Lou pops up and how Lou behaves. And there was also a very we didn't use words or VO, so everything had to be written to work as silent, right? Because we wanted you to be the character. And we didn't want to do a bunch of VO for it that had to be translated and or have subtitles or anything like that. So we wanted to do everything with basically like it's like writing for minds, right? So we only had like symbols and pictures and things that were very specific to the way that those cartoons are done. And I was the only one writing them, so I had to tell other people how to write it, which was kind of a weird. It's kind of weird at first, but I would manage to kind of break it down into like how we do it. So.
Yeah, the most voice you get in any of the games is like grunts or gibberish speaking or whatever.
It's all very, very, very much done on purpose, like to be funny, but 2, it was also because we had constraints around the budgets and how we wanted to do that stuff. So I had to figure out how we could do those things, make it funny, make it fun to watch.
Well, I love that, how that panned out.
You were talking that now bands have like cool stuff in their concerts. Would you, in a hypothetical new Guitar Hero, would you use that, or would you be more back in the old days with the standard light show, the fog, or would you use drones, this new sphere that is in America? I don't know how it's called, the place. All that is new stuff.
Yeah, the Las Vegas Sphere, they just call it that.
Yeah.
Here, yeah.
Would you do that in a new Guitar Hero, or would you be more down to earth?
It's funny because like when I saw Iron Maiden last year, they did a mix of both of those things. So they had big LED screens that had stuff that would switch. and then they had like they would switch the backgrounds and it would switch the patterns, and then they also had like they still had like the painted backdrops, and then they had these inflatable props that would come out. Like they had an inflatable World War II plane that comes out and it like hovers over the stage, and it's animating like it's flying. Just fantastic. But it's a mix of all those things, right? And so I think that if we were going to do new Guitar Hero venues, I would probably want to do that. But for me, it was about the fantasy of like the 80s stages, right? It was about the fantasy of like the weird moving stage pieces that were kind of like they only kind of moved in one direction, and they kind of just did this. And so you'll notice like in Guitar Hero 3, there's like the night with the
Yeah, and there were like standard stuff. They thought that it was limitations, but
it is limitations, but the limitations made it look like the stuff that we were actually trying to. This is what I'm talking about. Sometimes those limitations actually help you do things better. Because when you work on those limits, you're like, oh yeah, well if we couldn't animate it, we couldn't afford the skeleton to animate it. So what we did was we animated it in 3ds Max, and then we wrote a script that would just output all of the rotation points, and then that script got put on the object. And so basically all it's doing is rotating, but because all it's doing is rotating, it ends up looking like those old school stages, right? Because that they only could do very simple animatronic stuff. So
yeah,
there's a really cool nostalgia to that I would want to probably, if I was going to make a new Guitar Hero, I would probably want to maintain that.
all right, fair enough. Thank you.
Like I would want to make it look like an 80s stage, but I mean, it doesn't mean you couldn't. But we did stuff.
I mean, yeah, like new stuff, like a drone show, holographic stuff. It will be like amazing nowadays.
I'd love to see if we'd be able to. I know World Tour's engine has its limits, but I would love it if we could see like try to extend the limits even further than we already have. But at this point, it's getting like, how much more can we even expand the limits at this point?
Go further beyond.
So all right. So let's if that's good enough, then we should go immediately to the community questions. All right. So for the first question, is from Jackie. So they ask about character design. Can you tell why did some characters got a major design change in Guitar Hero 3, like Judy and Savior?
I think because, well, I think if I remember correctly, we wanted to put our own spin on some of that stuff, and we wanted to make things a little bit edgier, and we actually had to pull Judy's design back, because we kind of took it, we made her a lot edgier, and we had to pull her back a little bit. So, but the idea was just put the Neversoft spin on some of those things.
Yeah, all right. So Slam Dunk Fanatic asks, what's the most complex character or venue you have ever made?
I would say the most complicated one was probably Lou, because he was so much different than the other characters in terms of like, he didn't fit into the character creator thing, and he had like weird goat legs.
Oh yeah.
And so when I did his motion capture, I was standing up on my tiptoes to try and so that the legs would look right walking around the stage. So I would walk around on the balls of my feet so that his legs lined up. And then I would say like the most complicated venue, I think if we're talking about like just the number of things happening, there's probably a lot of them, but they were so every stage used the same components. So it wasn't hard to make them after a while. Once we figured out how to make them and what pieces were animated and how they were animated, it was easier to get them. It was easier to get them done. So they were all probably the same level of complication from the production standpoint. But like we did things for that ice cave stage that we didn't do. Like we had the big eye and it was moving around and it was blinking and it had to be behind ice. And so we had to find a way to mimic like the ice and stuff on there, and that was probably different than a lot of the stages that we did. The light shows and pyrotechnics, those kind of were specifically designed to all work in every stage, and so that we would just have to place the elements in there. So yeah, I don't know. And I'm trying to think about any of the particular stages from here. Metallica probably had the most like intense stages in terms of like, oh, in the round. Metallica insisted that their stage shows were done at that time all in the round. That if it was their tour, they had to do the stages in the round.
Yeah.
The only time they played on a different stage than in the round was if it was somebody else's festival and they could only play on a certain stage that everybody had to play on. And that was very complicated to do because their crowd characters only worked from one angle. They were rendered to texture, so the cards were always camera facing. And when you had things that were all in 360 degrees, those cards fell over. You couldn't. So we had to come up with a way to do the crowd pieces to work in 360 degrees, and we had to figure out how to do that and that changed up all of our camera positions. It changed up all of our stuff. We had to figure out how we were going to mocap that and have it fit. So like when they did their mocap session up in NorCal, we did it on an in the round stage, and we also did it on a flat stage. And then we had to figure out how to make them move with camera cuts from one place to another on the microphones, and switch places between camera cuts so that you would sell the illusion of them being in the round versus on a stage.
Oh, which venue was the round one? There's like there's Forum and Meadowlands and are two like round venues, I think.
Yeah, those are the only two round venues.
Oh, yeah. And then we had to very specifically figure out how to do those venues because they were unique. We had never done it in the round venue for any other band we had, because we had, like I said, we had a template for all those stages, right? So we had to basically come up with a new template and a new way to do crowd stuff.
And with Forum, you had Ecstasy of Gold at the start of the career mode, which was incredibly well done. I love the way y'all did Ecstasy of Gold.
All right, so let's go into the next question. Okay, so we have a really good one. This one is made by Hex. So he asks, was there any inspiration for the warrior versions or in base warrior versions of the characters in Warriors of Rock, or how come that characters like Eddie and Easy didn't get a warrior version? Also, Warrior Axel and Johnny are my favorites from that game. Axel reminds me of Iron Maiden, haha. But you already mentioned that you didn't do Warriors of Rock. Am I correct, right?
Yeah, I was there for some of the early concepts for that when we were thinking about doing stuff like that, but that I left shortly after that, so I wasn't part of the Warriors of Rock stuff.
All right. So for a second question is, how do you guys figure out a venue for a game? Like, was it based off the songs in the tier? A great example is Luz Inferno and Guitar Hero 3 with Raining Blood and the Number of the Beast. Or was it based off of being a small band and rising to the top? I know that second point isn't really the case after World Tour, I think, but I'm just curious.
So Neversoft, with all the Tony Hawk games and to some degree with replicated in the Guitar Hero games, we always had this idea that our games were about going from zero to hero, right? So in Guitar Hero 3, you see that you start off in like the dive bar and then you go and you move your way up, right? And in Guitar Hero 4, though, the idea there was that you were a big world touring band. You were kind of taking this tour all over the world. So there is the idea of zero to hero. There was still that idea in World Tour, except it was kind of starting from a different place. But the venues were a mix of fantastic venues that we wanted to have, like fantastic stage sets that we wanted to have, and a lot of that was based off of stuff that we would remember from when we were kids, right? Like from all these 80s metal shows we all used to go to. Me, Alan, Chris. All the artists used to come up with stuff. And they were a mix of venues that we were licensing because we wanted to license real world venues. So we had like Red Rocks, we had the House of Blues, we had, and sometimes I would, like for the House of Blues, I went to the House of Blues at this one House of Blues, the one that was in LA, I think. there's like an upstairs bar.
Yeah.
During shows, the whole upstairs bar splits in half and goes
Yes.
to you. And so you could be on either side of the bar upstairs and watch the show below. So we went and replicated that in the game.
Yeah, that is the encore sequence was great.
So we always wanted the show. We always wanted the encore to change the stage in some way, and we always wanted it. But a lot of times we were also using real world venues because they were getting placement in the game, right? So we would go to the venue and they would say, "Hey, Red Rock wants to be in the game," or "This venue, AT&T Ballpark wants to be in the game," or whatever. And so they would get licensed into the game. And then we would have to build a stage set around whatever that particular venue was. And so it would be kind of a mix of fantasy stages that we were designing in real world venues that we were licensing.
So we have a 3-in-1 from someone here. These are pretty short. From I can never say this name right. Slurpwiz. I'm not sure. Yeah. So the first one is what was your favorite game to work on? I guess just in general in the various games you have worked on.
I mean, I have two, and that would be Dark Watch and Gun, I think.
All right.
I'm a huge Western fan, and I would put Guitar Hero in there too, just because I'm such a huge metalhead. I love doing Guitar Hero. Those years were awesome because Alan and I, we were the ones that were going around and talking to all the musicians and trying to make some of the deals. And he and I think 3 nights a week sometimes would be at venues in LA going to see a band or going to meet. Well, we have a story that's probably not appropriate, but with Zach Wilde's manager, that he and I were going to a show at the House of Blues to meet Zach Wilde's manager. And we had a run-in with him, and he didn't know who we were, and he kind of yelled at us when we tried to talk to him. For like 3 or 4 years, we were treated like rock stars. Any venue we went to see a show, we had backstage passes, we had VIP seats, we had all this kind of stuff. The musicians all wanted to be in the game. So from that standpoint, like, it was awesome. Metallica invited us on tour for the summer. And
That's awesome.
Lars was like, if you really want to, if you really want to know what Metallica is, you got to come with us for the whole year, the whole summer to Europe, and go with us and all that. And we went back to Joel and Alan and I were like, Lars wants us to go on tour with him for the summer. Can we go? Like, that it's the way to get to know the band the best. And Joel goes, no. And we're like, why? And he was like, I was going to make the game. And we were like, we're. Anyway, but that was cool. The fantasy of making that game for 4 years was like the ultimate sort of like, almost like we were in a famous band. But then I loved making Gun and Dark Watch because I love Westerns and I love vampires, and making a vampire Western was awesome, and making a true Western with like all the actors that we had in Gun, like Thomas Jane, Chris Christopherson, and I got to work with all of them. What a surreal experience to work with those folks. Awesome.
Yeah, definitely.
I'd say like my time at Neversoft was like, I got to work with all my heroes, from Westerns and actors to musicians, and in general, there was not a bad experience in there. There were weird, but there wasn't a bad experience in there.
That's a good segue into our second question, which is your favorite memory of working with Neversoft.
My favorite memory of working at Neversoft, it's a general feeling that Neversoft was a weird anomaly that could not exist today. It was all skaters and metalheads and hard partiers and all making games together, and we crunched a lot, and we it was literally a work hard, play hard kind of place. And I mean, a lot of those things would not be appropriate in the industry these days, but but it was such a great group of people, and we're all still close friends. We all still hang out together. Like I had dinner with Alan last night, and Marv's and I are still best friends. And I talk to Vance every now and then. I go to Cody's house for Halloween whenever I'm in town every year, or his parties, and I run into people that are basically like, it's not very often you make really good lifelong friends at your work, but I have really great lifelong friends from my time at Neversoft, and I would say that any of those games that we worked on together, there was a bond between the teams that is hard or impossible to find, I would say, anywhere else.
Well, that's a fantastic thing. I'm glad it was such a good experience.
Yeah.
And the third one that she had was did you work with any celebrities for their cameos, like Gwen Stefani, Taylor Swift, Van Halen? And if so, what was your favorite moment?
I worked with Brett. I worked with Slash briefly. I worked with all the guys in Metallica, all the guys in Aerosmith. I would say,
What about any of the guys in World Tour? Because we had
Billy,
yeah, Bill,
Billy
yep.
Corgan. We had the girl from Paramore. We had
Haley Williams,
Haley Williams.
Billy Corgan, yeah. Then we had Ozzy Osbourne, Sting.
Oh, I had to go to Ozzy's house and pick up his clothes. And he does not live anywhere near whatever that show was from the Osbournes. He had a house in Calabasas, and it was like a white and blue Romanesque house that was not the house from the Osbournes. That was a house they rented. It was a set for the show. And so his house was just this really nice house out in Calabasas that you would think any person would live in. And I went out there to pick up. He forgot to bring his stage clothes or whatever he was doing. And so I had to go to his house and get it and bring it back to the stage. I would say, and I wrote an article about this, I had to babysit Lemmy for a day.
Oh boy.
Lemmy came into the studio to do all his motion capture, and we got a writer for Lemmy that said he needed a red crystal glass, 2 1-liter bottles of Jack Daniels, a chest full of ice, and cans of Diet Coke. And it had to be all those things. He drank an entire liter of Jack Daniels while he was doing his motion capture.
Holy crap.
Like, he was making himself Jack and Diet Cokes in the and I was like, oh my God, how is this guy doing all this exercise, like sweating through his mocap suit while he's drinking like this? But he was there for the whole day.
To down a liter of Jack Daniels that fast, holy crap.
Well, he drank it over the course of the day, but just the fact that he was doing, he drank the whole liter bottle. Okay, here, I can show you this. This is just some cool things to look at. Can I share my screen? Yeah. So here's me. Can you see the Todd McFarlane picture?
Okay.
You are seeing it?
Yes, we can see it.
Yeah, so there was me and Todd McFarlane when we were doing the characters. Here's me and Aerosmith. That's Jason Greenberg, who is the animation guy. It's Chris Parisi, who is our producer. And Steven Tyler did not like that I was tall. So anytime we took a picture together, he had to climb on top of me. We had a really fun back and forth, me and him. Like I would kind of poke fun at him, he would poke fun at me, and that was a really fun time. And then here's Lemmy holding my brains in. He told me that's what he was doing. I asked him at one point if he really carried a gun on him everywhere he went, and he was like, "Do you want to find out?" And I was like, and then when we took this picture, he goes like, this was after I had asked him that question. He goes like, and this is what it would look like if I was holding your brains in your head. And then here's Lars from that day that we did the shortest straw.
Or Lars, and how many times he had to start over for that song.
And there's the shirt I was wearing. You can see it there.
Yeah.
Okay. Zombie shirt. And this was us at Industrial Light and Magic, because I told you we had done that. We had done a not Most Likely, but we had done a Jabba's Palace stage that we pitched. We built it, and the band was going to play in the band stage area.
Yeah.
But we didn't end up licensing. We had to license it, and the cost was crazy, so we didn't do it. But,
Yeah,
All right. Wow, that's intense.
we get the channel backups.
So, all right. So to continue with this, Akiva asks two questions actually. Neversoft related question. What's the most difficult part when you're making a venue for a Guitar Hero game?
the most difficult part of it was we had to do these advertisements in the game, and like paid advertisement stuff.
Yeah, you had Coca-Cola and KFC on the world tour.
Yeah, Times Square had a crazy amount of advertising in it.
And I know a lot of those were like dynamic advertisements that like came in through a certain system, and so we had to make sure that like the advertisements, and this is the part of the business of making video games, like that in order for them to generate money off the ads had to take up so much of the screen and at certain angles in order for it to register as the exposure time of the ad. So we had to do that, and then some places paid for like specific permanent placement, like KFC wanted a venue with a big KFC bucket in there. So we had to figure out what kind of venue do we make that has a KFC bucket. And so we did a country fair, which is I think
Strutter's Farms.
I don't know, what was it?
Strutter's Farm. It's a Louisiana venue, apparently.
Right. And they really hated that we put them in that place. They did not like that they were associated with like country fair stuff, but it was like where it made the most sense to put a giant KFC bucket. So so sometimes dealing with like the advertising side of it and the product placement side of it, and then also getting the venue owners to sign off on the venues for their accuracy, even though we had to kind of make fantasy versions of them. Like the logistics of that got complicated, but that was probably the most complicated part of it. Making them was just fun.
Oh, I actually wanted to, I don't mean to interrupt the community questions, but that's just was a great thing that I figured I meant to ask this way earlier, and it just now came back to me. Tool venue for World Tour. What was that process like, sitting down with the guys of Tool making that?
That was a very unique situation because we had never done a venue like that before, and it was me and Jake and the two brothers from Tool, I don't know their names, came in. It wasn't Maynard, it was the other guys, the guys who were the two brothers.
There's Adam Jones as one of them.
Yes, Adam, and so they came in for it.
Alex Gray was their artist, I think.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is. The two of them came in, and we talked about what we could do. And the idea was I wanted to do something very surreal and that would cycle through like one of their videos, right? But we had never done a venue like that before. So me and Jake, who was the lead environment artist at the time, like we sat down and kind of planned the whole thing out with them, and we kind of sketched some stuff on some napkins. And then Jake went back and started to mock it up. We ended up making it like a sort of a semi-hidden venue in the game.
You had to pay $8,000 to play that gig. It's the most expensive paid gig in the game.
Yeah. So that was that was super fun because we literally sat for a whole day in the meeting room with them, kind of coming up with ideas and sketching stuff out on napkins and pieces of paper. And Jake and I were going back and forth on how we could do like the floaty head things and cycling through all the different. So basically, we took the light show and turned the light show into the cycling backgrounds. So all the rising action, now this is all now coming back to me. So all the rising action stuff, the prelude, the whatever, all of those controlled the different cycling backgrounds and the crazy heads and all that sort of stuff.
Well, I
That's so
I do
cool.
know that the light shows are actually centered out around the eyeball. I didn't even know that it was actually controllable on the actual environment itself. I think that's pretty.
If I remember correctly, it did swap the backgrounds out for some of those things.
All right.
That's so cool. It's such a cool way to repurpose it.
Yeah.
Uh,
And, this is the thing that's really fun about making games, man. Is sometimes when you have like the most constraints, because like that was not one of those things that like we planned from the very beginning of the game. That was like, hey, Tool wants to make a venue, right? And so like we had a week to do it, or whatever. It was like some really short amount of time. They came in, they sat down, we talked about it, and then we had to figure out how to do something really creative in a really short amount of time. And sometimes the best things you do are based off of those situations, which is fantastic, I think.
Yeah, and I know that they didn't want to be involved in the traditional way because of where they come from and what their background is more like.
Yeah, and I think we nailed it. To be honest, like I think.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I love that venue. It was one of my favorite ones in the game.
it's actually interesting if you can manage to hack your way through and load up Tool songs on like non-Tool venues, the camera does not move at all after the intro sequence.
Right.
Which is, rightfully so. Right.
Okay, so continuing with Akiwa's question, this is something interesting. I'm not sure how much they're gonna let you answer this, but Insomniac Games related question. Since you're working at Insomniac Games, which I assume you've also worked on the Spider-Man games, what's your favorite Spider-Man suits in the latest Spider-Man game?
I unfortunately cannot talk about Insomniac stuff.
I was going to say, probably NDAs and stuff.
That's good. That's completely fine. Let's see. Okay, this one's good. Persona Lover 15 asks, what if some new features like custom highways and music and rockers and instruments can be added in a future Guitar Hero what if scenario? I think it's probably.
I'm not sure. You have to elaborate a little bit for me. I'm not really quite sure.
I'm not sure. Maybe it's probably related to Rock Band 4, where I'm not sure. Have you ever played Rock Band 4? So their highways are actually like animated. They're like kind of like GIFs in a way, but they're actually. It's super interesting. So I guess I could probably. Would you probably see something like that in a future Guitar Hero game, or would it be like, the same static texture that we've always known from Guitar Hero?
Yeah, we actually prototyped animated highways.
Really? Okay.
That's cool.
And we found them distracting.
That probably would make sense.
It made the notes really hard to read. Yeah. As it was, like, we had very particular rules about like the patterns and stuff that went on those things, because the thing that had to stick out the most was the jewels. And interestingly enough, as a side note, our jewels are 2D; they're not 3D like they are in Rock Band.
Right.
And we had to render them. And the thing that always pissed me off about looking at those highways was that the jewels are not in the correct perspective for the lane that they're in, and it's really hard to see. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. It used to drive me crazy every time we would be putting it together again. I'm like, can we just find a different way to do these jewels, please? No, but we did prototype animated stuff. I would want to go back to doing them, 3D the way Rock Band did them, and I think animated venues is cool stuff. I would probably want to improve on how star power works and all that sort of stuff, I think.
What about like what about the idea of like if you could like import like an image off the device as like a highway and it would scale it to fit in game? I think that'd be probably kind of cool if that ever were a thing.
Yeah, I mean, if what would be cool is if like we had all these patterns you could use in the Creator Skater, the Creator Rocker, so you could make your own designs and stuff. I would want to do that for the highway, like make your own highway, and you can use your own. We give you like a library of graphics, and you can take those.
Oh yeah,
put your own highways together.
Yeah, just use the same suite of images and graphics, or whatever. Just use the same 40 layer system on the highway. That'd be great.
Yeah,
that would have been an amazing idea.
I don't think there was a reason why we couldn't do it then, but I'm sure now with new technology that something like that would be fine. Even if it would probably just bake it down to one texture.
You know what? Here, this is gonna be our last question for the community. So, Skeletor 500 asks, have you by any chance have any involvement with the Guitar Hero On Tour character designs, which is the Guitar Hero DS games, which is very funny because there's I think Axel Steel and Judy Nails are actually using the same assets from the actual Guitar Hero 3 games and those DS. So I don't know if you would know anything about that being the case.
So the on tour stuff, when they were making that, the only involvement we really had besides giving them the assets and stuff was to look at the hardware when it came in. So they sent us the prototypes for the plug thing that you plugged into the back of the DS.
Yeah, it will go into the Game Boy cartridge slot.
Yeah. And that's what we're talking about, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, it was the thing. It was the four fret handheld thing.
Yeah. So we looked at that and made sure that we were okay with it. I think the assets that went to them, like we just handed them the assets, and I think once they had some venues in, I remember kind of looking at the venues and going like, oh, okay, well it's the Game Boy, so this is what it's gonna look like. The bigger involvement we had was with the studio that was Budcat that did our PS2 versions and the Wii version.
yes.
And we had to figure out a way to do all the light shows and stuff with the constraints of the Wii and the older consoles, and they had to basically do pre-rendered backgrounds for all of the
For literally, yeah. So on World Tour PS2 on onward, all of the venues are actually just pre-rendered, which is like it's like a green screen, weirdly enough. But on Wii, they are actually rendered just with low polygons and they're like less details.
Yeah. And I had to go out to Budcat. I think I was out there for like 2 or 3 weeks, working with them on how light shows worked, how the venues were set up, all that sort of stuff. And that was great. I loved working with those dudes.
All right. So the last one is from Skelter as well. Also curious if there was any other concept characters that were left on the cutting room floor for Guitar Hero 3, World Tour, and etc. So if you guys had any returning characters from Guitar Hero 2 or any other characters, then slash, I don't know, maybe, I don't know, somebody from
we had to get rid of one guy because he looked like Jimi Hendrix.
Oh, Savior Stone, right? That's his name.
Yeah, and when we were trying to get Jimi Hendrix in the game, and there was a whole big blowout with his family. They didn't like that guy being in the game. And we had to pull him from the game because the family was upset about how he looked so much like Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
I know he made it in GH3, but then from that point forward, no.
Yep. And I think that conversation started because we wanted to put Jimi Hendrix in the game at some point.
Yeah, and he made it in 4. He made it in World Tour for 2 songs in AT&T Ballpark.
And the DLC as well. So
Yeah, and DLC. And
all right. So
I think that's all we had for the communities.
All right. If that's all, again, Aaron, thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking your time with asking us these questions. Before we go, can you tell the audience where do you have any social medias that we can keep track with you on anything that you do on video games?
My social media is like all kind of personal. I don't really tend to do any video and game industry stuff, but my Instagram is probably the best one, and that's Ahab's Adventures. Ahab's AHABS_adventures.
All right. So without further ado, thank you, Aaron, again. Thank you for spending the time with us. And thank you all for watching our session. I hope everybody has a really great weekend. And until next time, see you, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you, Aaron.